Okay, we're in the Gemara towards the bottom of Daf Nun Amud Beis. So we're talking over here about minhagim. Mishnah began with makim shenagu, so there are different minhagim that we're going to speak about today. And today we're going to speak about certain minhagim that don't have any real basis. They're not minhagim that are really chumris, that are necessary, and therefore you don't have to follow them. Zok the Gemara, b'nei Chuzahi, the people of Chuzai, Nagi, their custom was the mafreshi chala me'areza. They would give chala even from a chala that was even from a dough that was made out of rice. You know, I don't have to give chala only from the 5 grains, not rice. Also, v'amru leila Rav Yosef. So they came and reported this to Rav Yosef. Amalahu, so Rav Yosef said to the people that told him about this, Nechle zar ba'payu. Let a Yisrael eat this challah in the presence of the people, so they should see that it's really not challah, it doesn't belong to the kohen. To teach them the halacha. Eisvei Abaye, so Abaye asked on this that Rav Yosef said, didn't we learn in a brayso that says, Dvarim hamutarim, things that are permitted, but v'acherim noyegim b'hem iser. But certain people are noyeg, they conduct themselves as if it would be forbidden. You're not allowed to be materit in their presence because they might come to be mezalzel. If they'll think that this that they thought is forbidden is really permitted, they might come to think the same regarding other things that are truly forbidden. So how could Rav Yosef say to the people that they should go in front of the people of Chuzai, and eat this challah in front of them to show them that it's mutter? So he answered him, Rav Yosef answered Abaye, but v'lav miyitma Allah, didn't we learn about this? Amar Rav Chisda b'kutoi. This that you're not allowed to show, demonstrate that something is mutter when they are noyeg iser, that's only regarding the kutoim. And what's the reason? Kutoi my time mishum de misrechi milsa, because they're not careful with the different things that the chachamim were masakin. And if you're going to show them one thing is mutter, then they're going to come and be mezalzel more, and they might extend that to other things that are really aser. So this is a question actually. The Gemara is asking a question. My time mishum the misrechi milsa. So the kutoi, the reason is because they're going to extend this heta to other things. Harachin shinami. So these people of Chuzai that didn't know the halachas as well, so sarchi milsa, they're also going to come to extend this heta to other things as well. So how could you come and show them that it's mutter? Elo amar Ravashi. So Ravashi says that the rule goes as follows. There's a different way, different approach you have over here when you get to this inyan. Chazinon, we have to see as follows. Iruban oirez achli. If most of the people are eating this rice bread, so lenechlezar bapayu. So don't do this. Don't have a person eat this bread in front of them without taking a challah, because dilma mishtakchet teiris challah minayu. Maybe they're going to forget about the whole thing of challah, about the whole mitzvah of challah. Most of them are eating rice bread. They're going to stop giving challah. Then, if they're going to eat from any other grains, they might b'chlal forget about the whole union of challah. Sorry. V'i ruban dagan achli. If most of them are eating from other grains, so then nechle zar ba'payu. So then you're going to have someone correct this mistake. They're not going to forget about the mitzvah of challah because they're giving challah from other grains, but you need to have someone correct this mistake, and the reason is dilme asila frushi min achiyev al aptur. They may come to separate challah from something that's chayev on something which is potter. In other words, they might take challah from any of the 5 grains, from a bread that comes from any of the 5 grains, and separate from that for the rice bread and give that to the kohen. And what would happen is the kohen is eating something. He thinks it's challah, but it's really not challah. It's tevel, because you separated it for the rice, and really the rice doesn't deserve to be challah b'chlal. Or menaptor al achiyev. You're going to come, that you never took challah from that. There was never challah separated from that. You used it to separate challah from one of the rice challah, but you never took challah from that. Or you're going to come to use something which is potter to separate challah from rice bread for bread that's made from the 5 grains. And you're going to think that you were yaitz the mitzvah of challah, and you really weren't. So therefore, in this case, if most people are eating from rice, from regular grains, you're going to have to teach them this halacha in order that they shouldn't come to do this. There's another chiddush over here, because usually the halacha is that you're not allowed to give challah from different minim. Challah has to be given from the same min. So the concern over here is that they might give challah from another min and make this mistake. But really, you're not supposed to give challah this way anyways. So some say that, they might make an additional mistake. That's the concern. If they're thinking that you give challah from rice, so they might make the mistake and give challah from rice on one of the other grains. Or others say that maybe they're going to have a batter or whatever, a dough that has the mixture of ingredients of rice and other grains together, and then you are going to be chayiv in challah, and you could give the... it's together in one, so it's not about different minim, giving from the rice to another min, because it's mixed in the same ingredients. Here you see this is one example of a minig which is not a proper minig, and therefore you have to correct this minig. Now going back to this brayso that we mentioned before. When you have things that are permissible and others are noyegis on them, and there really is no reason for the iser. You're not allowed to be materit for them, so they shouldn't come to do it by bring a heta to other things that are forbidden. Rav Chisda said, "B'kutoy yaskinam." That's talking only about the kutam, as I mentioned before, because they're going to extend that heta to other things. Frag the Gemara, v'kula al meloi. This rule that you shouldn't be mat to something for people that are noyeg iser on something, even though it's not aser, is this not true by other people? But Vatanya, we learned in the brayso, the Gemara here is going to bring 3 examples where you see that you're not supposed to be mat to something in the presence of people that don't know of this, that it's mutter. So the first example is Reichetzen Shnei Achen Ke'echad. 2 brothers could go to the bathhouse together. There's no concern, there's no issue that they're going together to the bathhouse, that they may have inappropriate thoughts. But ve'ein Reichetzen Shnei Achen Be'Kabel. In Bavel, a city in Bavel, they had this minig that 2 brothers would not go to the bathhouse together. The story was, Bi Yehuda ve'Hillel banav shel Rabbi Gamliel. They were both sons of Rabbi Gamliel. Sherachzu shneim ke'echad. They both went to the bathhouse together, Bakavel in this city. Ve'loza alein kol Medina, and all the people there in the city were screaming about this. How could they do such a thing? Amru, we never saw in our days, in our times, that 2 brothers should go to the bathhouse together. V'nishmat Hillel v'yatzel b'ayis achitzen. And Hillel just slipped out and he went to the outer room, to the dressing room, and he separated from his brother. He didn't want to tell them that really there's no such a chumrah, it's really allowed. So we see here one case where even though there was a minig that does not have a proper basis, it's really allowed, but nevertheless, if the people in that place are noyeg iser, you don't have to correct them. Another example, Bekur Kedisen, Yaitzim b'kur de kisen. B'Shabbos, you're allowed to go out b'kur de kisen on Shabbos. This is some type of galoshes that you place on the shoes that are loose, and it could be a concern that it could fall off on Shabbos. So it says you're allowed to use it on Shabbos, and there's no such a concern. But ve'en yaitzim b'kur de kisen b'Shabbos b'biri. In the city Biri, they did not use these kur de kisen on Shabbos. Umaisa, again, the same thing. Be Yehuda ve'Hillel banu shel Rabbi Gamliel. The story with these 2 children of Rabbi Gamliel. Sheyatzu b'kur de kisen b'Shabbos b'Biri. In this city Biri, they did wear this kur de kisen on Shabbos. V'laza alein ametina, and all the people are there were screaming about them. V'amru meimenu le'reinu kach. We never saw anyone wear this kur de kisen on Shabbos. V'shamtum, they slipped it off. V'nastum lavdein, and they gave it to their servants to wear so that they should. They didn't want to let them know that really there is no gzeira and you're allowed to wear this kur de kisen on Shabbos. Third example, v'yeshvin al safsale nochrim b'Shabbos. You're allowed to sit on the benches of goyim where they sell their merchandise on Shabbos, and we're not afraid that it looks like that you're going to be selling things on Shabbos. In the city Akkoi, they had the stringency that they would not sit on the benches of goyim of their merchandise on Shabbos. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel sat on one of these benches on Shabbos, and in the city of Akkoi, all of Kol Medina, all the people in the city there were screaming about him. Omru, they said, we never saw someone on Shabbos to sit in this place. Nishmat al gavi karka. So he slipped off from the bench and he sat on the ground. He didn't want to tell them that it's allowed. So we see 3 cases over here where when you're doing something which is opposite of the minig of the place, even though it's something which is totally allowed, and we're not talking about kutoim. Before we said, Rav Chisda said only people kutoim, which were people that are mezalzel in the words of the chachamim. So then you're not allowed to tell them. But over here we see that in all these cases that you're not allowed to tell them. And says the Gemara, B'nei Medina Sayam Nami. This is not only about the kutoim, but people that live in Medina Sayam and in the countries overseas. Even the Leute Shchichi Rabbanan Gabayu, since they don't have a lot of Talmidei Chachamim amongst them, Kekutim Dami. They're similar to the kutim, and therefore, if they're doing something, if they have a minik to asa something, you shouldn't tell them that it's permitted because they may come to extend that to other things. Or others are gairis, not Medina Sayyam, so others are gairis B'nai Medina, other cities that are further out in Eretz Yisrael, like Akkay. Instead of that, you can't be gairis Medina Sayyam because Akkay is in Eretz Yisrael, but it's further out. Sagt the Gemara weiter. So now, the Gemara goes through these cases over here to see what's the problem here. So the reason why there would be an issue with sitting on the benches of these merchants, of these Gaishim merchants, it looks like that you're selling something on Shabbos. Because the kisa nami wearing these galoshes on Shabbos, because they're loose, and you might remove them on Shabbos and carry it. But when it came to two brothers going to the bathhouse, my time alone, what would be the reason? Why did they have this custom not to go together to the bathhouse? Says the Gemara, Kidatanya. This is based on the following brayses that we learned. A person is allowed to go to the bathhouse with anybody, chutz mi'aviv v'chomav, besides his father or father-in-law, ubal imai, or his mother's husband, ubal achaisai, or his brother-in-law. But Rabbi Yehuda mater ba'aviv. Rabbi Yehuda says with the father it's allowed, mipnei kavod aviv, and if he has to help out his father, and v'hu adin l'bal imai, or his stepfather, his mother's husband. And this is the brayse that said that in these cases you're not allowed to go with them into the bathhouse. Now, also inu, the people of Kabul, they came the gazer b'shnei yachin, and they also extended this and made a decree also regarding two brothers not to go to the bathhouse together. Mishum bal achaisai, because it's similar. You might come to go with your brother-in-law to the bathhouse. Tana and a brayse we learned Talmud lo yirchatzim rabbi. A student should not go to the bathhouse with his teacher, but vim rabbi tzarich loi. If his teacher needs him to help him, then mutter, then it's allowed. Now the Gemara brings another example of a minig that is not necessarily a minig that has a good basis. Kiyasa Rabbi Bar Bar Chana, when Rabbi Bar Bar Chana came to Bavel, Achal de iyatra. He ate a certain part of the fats, which is called iyatra. As Rashi says, there are the fats that are not allowed to be eaten, that are near the stomach of the animal, and then the fats that are very close to the stomach are not allowed. The iyatra is a different part of the fats. It's a little bit further out. And therefore, this is allowed. This is permitted fats. And therefore, he ate it. But in Bavel, the minig was that they did not eat these fats. It's very hard to distinguish exactly which fats are allowed and which are not. So he had the Kabbalah from Eretz Yisrael that he's allowed to eat it. But in Bavel, they would not eat it. So he was now in Bavel. And what happened was, he saw that the Rabbi Avira and the Rabbi were coming to visit him. Even the Chazinu, as soon as he saw them, kasya minayu. So he covered from them this iyatra, this fats, so that they shouldn't see that he's eating this fats. That in Bavel, the custom was not to eat it. I'm not sure how you could tell that it was iyatra fats. I mean, it's all kapanim. It was somehow was recognized. It could be recognized, and he hid it that they shouldn't see that he's eating this in Bavel. Also, v'omru leila Abaye. So Rabbi Avira Saba and Rabbi Bereder Rav Huna came and reported to Abaye that Rabbi Bar Bar Chana is eating these fats that are forbidden. Amalahu. So Abaye said to them, Shavinchu kikutai. He's treating you like a kuti. He's hiding it from you, hiding it from you, that is. When you're coming, because he's afraid that if you're going to see that this is really mutter, you might extend this heter to other things as well. But really, it's allowed, in other words. So he's just the fact that he hid it from you is because he doesn't trust you. He's treating you like a kuti. The Mefarshim actually say, I think the Marshal says, that over here it's the opposite than a kuti. In a kuti, you're afraid because of his zilzul. He might come to extend the heter to other things. What Abai was telling them is that because you're such great Talmidei Chachamim, he was afraid that with your great sharp minds, you might take this heter of this iyatra fats and extend this heter to find a reason to be matter other fats as well, other things as well. So therefore he hid it from you. Correct. He noticed them, and then when they came in, it was too late. They saw that he had his fats. But Rabbi Bar Bar Chana Leslie, fragt the Gemara. Now, how did Rabbi Bar Bar Chana himself do this? But Rabbi Bar Bar Chana Leslie hadit nan. Does he not hold of what it says in our Mishnah? Going now back to our Mishnah. Noisnin olav chumrei amakim sheyatsa misham. You place upon a person the chumris of the place that he left from there. V'chumrei amakim shehalach l'sham. And also the chumris of the place that you arrived there. So over here he arrived to Bavel, and apparently this chumrah of not eating this iyatra fats is a legitimate chumrah. It's very difficult to distinguish which fats, and this is the chumrah they had. So why in Bavel was he eating this fats? Abaye explained, Hani mili mi Bavel le Bavel. This that it said in our Mishnah is only from one city in Bavel to another city in Bavel. Or mi Eretz Yisrael le Eretz Yisrael. Or from one place in Eretz Yisrael to another place in Eretz Yisrael. Inami or mi Bavel Eretz Yisrael. Someone that's traveling from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, so you have to follow the chumrah of the place that you arrive to. Avam Eretz Yisrael le Bavel loy. But traveling from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, you don't have to follow this chumrah. Why not? Kiven the anan kaifinon luhu. Since us, we in Bavel, we are really subordinate to the people in Eretz Yisrael. As Rashi here brings, only in Eretz Yisrael did they have proper smicha. They would be mekadosh the chaydesh and odine knosses. A lot of halachas only the rabbanim in Eretz Yisrael were able to do, and not the people in Bavel. So really, we are tafel and we're kafuf to them. So therefore, avdinon kivasaya, we have to do like them. Meaning, when someone comes from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he could continue keeping his custom like he has when he was in Eretz Yisrael, because in Eretz Yisrael is where they had the proper smicha. So this halacha that you have to follow the chumrah in the place that you arrive is not for a person that's coming from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel. Rav Ashi said a different answer. Afilat teimim Eretz Yisrael to Bavel. Truth is, even a person that comes from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel should follow the chumras of Bavel. But hanimili, this whole idea that you have to follow the chumras of the place that you're in, that's if you're not planning on returning to where you came from. But Rabba Baba Chana, he was in Bavel on a visit. He was planning on returning to Eretz Yisrael, so he doesn't have to follow the minig of Bavel. If you die telachsa, you don't have to assume the minhagim of the place. So Mefarshim say that the argument here between Rav Ashi and Abaye is, what's the reason why you have to follow the minhagim of the place that you're in? As we'll see soon in the Gemara. Either the reason is because you don't want to cause machlekes. If the reason is you don't want to cause machlekes, it doesn't make a difference if you're planning on returning or not. Now you're here, and this is the minig in the place, don't establish your own minhagim. But if the reason is because once I'm here, I become part of the people here, and I have to assume the minhagim, so then that's only if you're not planning on returning. But if you're planning on returning, you don't become part of the congregation that's here, you're going back to another place so you can keep your own minhagim.
I lived over there,
but we're talking about Rabba Baba Chana.
Yeah, Rabbi is saying that you should.
He's defending Rabba Baba Chana.
But he himself from the place that the minig is not to eat.
So he didn't eat a yatra. He didn't eat this fats. He himself didn't eat it. He's explaining Rabba Baba Chana. Rabba Baba Chana was returning. That was Rav Ashi's pshat. Or Rabbi was saying because he came from Eretz Yisrael. Amalei Rabba Baba Chana Librei. Rabba Baba Chana tells his son, Beni, my son, like toichal. Don't eat this yatra fat, this part of the fats, loy befonai, not in my presence, veloy shaloi befonai. Also, not in my presence, you shouldn't eat it either. Ani, I myself, shareisi is Rabbi Yechanan sha'achal. I saw Rabbi Yechanan eating these fats. Kedai hu Rabbi Yechanan lismechalov. So Rabbi Yechanan is enough that I could rely on him. Befonav v'shaloi befonav, both in his presence and not in his presence, and I can eat these fats. Atta, but you, Leira Isa Isai, you didn't see Rabbi Yechanan eating these fats. Like Toichal, do not eat it. Ben Befanav, Ben Shaloi Befanav. Not in front of him and not in front of him. So this is a very unusual thing. That because he heard the psak directly, or he saw directly Rabbi Yechanan giving this psak, so he could be Noyeg Heter. Anybody else can't. So usually you don't say such a thing. If there's a heter from a reputable Rav, so then anybody can use this heter. But here, apparently, when it comes to this yatra fats, it's something which is very, very difficult to decipher. What's the yatra fats, what's not, what's exactly mutter. So therefore, Rabbi Baba Chana didn't want him to use this heter. I says, I saw it personally, so I'm going to use this heter. But anyone else, unless you hear it from the expert himself, from Rabbi Yechanan himself, you shouldn't rely on this heter. Now the Gemara brings, Upliga didei adidei. Rabbi Baba Chana, when he said this, is arguing on something else that he himself said. Rabbi Baba Chana said, Sachli Rabbi Yechanan ben Elazar. Rabbi Yechanan ben Elazar told me, Pamachas nechnasti yachar Rab Shimon ben Rabbi Yosi ben Lakunya. I once followed this Rab Shimon into Lagina, into a garden. And this wasn't a Shemitah. Right, so what happened there in Shemitah? The Natal Sfiche Krov, he took the aftergrowth of cabbage and va'achal, and he took it to eat, and v'nasan li, and he gave it to me to eat as well. So Rashi explains, we're talking about Shemitah, la'achar zman habir. We learned about this yesterday, or in the Mishnah, it mentioned that after the time of biur, which means when there's nothing else left in the fields for the animals to eat, so then you can't take it for yourself. You have to leave it there in the field. But the aftergrowth of the krov, he took it, even though it was after the time that you're supposed to leave it in the field, he took it and he ate it, and he gave me to eat as well. V'amali, and he told me, B'ni, my son, b'fanai echol, in my presence, you can do this heter and eat from this, but shaloi b'fanai loy toichal. But not in my presence, don't eat it. Why? Ani sharisis Rab Shimon ben Yochi sha'achal. I personally saw Rab Shimon ben Yochi eating from the aftergrowth of the cabbage on Shmita. Kedayu Rab Shimon ben Yochi lismechalov. So Rab Shimon ben Yochi could be relied upon. B'fanav v'shaloi b'fanav. In his presence and not in his presence. Ata, however, you didn't see Rab Shimon ben Yochi himself being naig heter in this. B'fanai achayil, in my presence you could eat, but shaloi b'fanai lo teichal. Not in my presence you can't eat from this. So this is different than what he said before. Before he said that if you didn't hear it directly from the source of the heter, so then even in my presence you shouldn't eat it. But over here he's saying only not in my presence you shouldn't eat this. Now the Gemara brings the source of the subject. What's this heter of svichei krov? All svichim, anything that grows in Shemitah, including things that grow, what's svichim? Svichim are aftergrowth, which means it grew on its own. Nobody planted it, but it grew on its own. But once it comes the time when there's nothing left for the animals in the field, you're supposed to get rid of it. You can't take it into your house and leave it in the field. So what's the pshat? What's the basis of the heter of the svichei krov? So what's Rab Shimon? My Rab Shimon. The Tanya Rab Shimon said, Kol asfichin asurim, all aftergrowths in the field are forbidden after the time of the beer, chutz misvichei krov, besides the aftergrowth of the cabbage. Why? She'en chayetze ben b'yerek asada. They're different than all the other vegetables in the field. Rashi has two pshat in what this means. One pshat Rashi says is that really the svichei krov are different than all the other svichim because the leaves just continue growing on the stalk of the krov, and it's not really something that was planted or grew in Shemitah itself. It's something that's just the leaves keep on growing more and more, and the whole Isser of Shemitah is only something which was planted in Shemitah itself and grew in Shemitah itself. This is just leaves that are getting added to the stalk. It's one pshat, but Rashi doesn't hold to this pshat. Rashi says that's not what svichim are. Svichim is something that's planted in Shemitah itself. The second pshat Rashi says is svichei krov is something which is always available for the animals in the field. There's always enough for it available, and therefore this is something that there's never a time that you have to get rid of it in your house. So therefore, Rab Shimon said that you could always take the svichei krov into your house. The Chachamim said, Kol asfichin asurim, all of the svichim are forbidden, not only in other words, including svichei krov. It makes no difference. So this was the argument between Rab Shimon and the Chachamim. And the Gemara now explains the basis of the argument. V'tarvayu aliba de Rabbi Akiva. Their argument is both based on what Rabbi Akiva said. The Tanya, Rabbi Akiva said, the Pasuk says, Hein loy nizra v'loy nesav istfuseinu. That in Shemitah we're not going to plant and we're not going to gather our grains. So Rabbi Akiva asked on this pasuk, if we don't plant, how are we gathering anything? So how does the pasuk say, if they're not planting, so there's nothing to gather? You don't have to add that. The pasuk doesn't have to say loy nesef. So the answer is mikan l'sfichin shehein asuren. From here you see that even things that you did not plant, but they grew on their own from seeds that fell. This is what's called sfichim. The things that grew on their own are also going to be aser on Shemitah when it comes to the time of the beer. That's the source of the concept that sfichim are aser. So now going back to the argument of Rab Shimon and the Chachamim, b'mai kamiflagi, what are they arguing about? Rabbanan Savri, Rabbanan say, Gazrinon, Sfichi, Krov, Otu Shar, Sfichi D'Alma, that even though the Sfichim of Krov are really different, but nevertheless they made a gzeira and they said that Sfichi Krov, the aftergrowth of cabbage, should be also like everything else. And Rab Shimon Savaloi Gazrinon, Sfichi Krov, Otu Sfichi D'Alma. They did not make this gzeira. Everybody could see the difference of the Sfichi Krov, and therefore by Sfichi Krov you're allowed to eat it even after the time of the beer. This is Rashi's pshat in our Gemara. There's a very long thesis over here, as you can see, that has another two pshatim in this Gemara. Exactly what's the story with this svichei krov? According to Tosfos, it's not talking about the issue of after the zman of beer. One of the pshatim of Tosfos is he brings from Rab Nissim Goin. It's talking about a gzeira of Chazal, that things that grew in Shemitah are not allowed to be used even after Shemitah, even when it goes out after Shemitah. And that's what the subject of our Gemara is about. A whole different pshat, and there's another pshat from Rabbeinu Tam and Tosfos. There's a few different pshatim here in this Gemara. But this is the simple pshat in the Gemara. This whole thing was just brought up to demonstrate this idea that sometimes you have a heter, when it's something which is a unique heter, not in every case, but certain heterim, you have to hear it from the source itself. If you don't hear it from the source itself, you can't be noig heter on this. I don't know of any practical example of this today. I'm not sure what kind of yeah. When do you have to be noig the chumrah of the minig that the place that you come to? That's halacha l'maisa, but the exact application for it, when it applies, I'm not sure. The Mishnah said, another detail here, one more piece today. The Mishnah said, benegeh to a person that goes from one place to another. So the Mishnah said two things. First, the Mishnah said, you always have to go l'chumrah. If the place you came from is l'chumrah, so you have to go l'chumrah. If the place that you arrived to is l'chumrah, not to do malacha, so you have to go l'chumrah again. But then the Mishnah said, va'al yishana adam mipnei machlekes. Don't change from the meaning of the place because of machlekes. So that seems to be a contradiction. So says the Gemara, ha'heilich mimakim v'chulu. Now, you're coming from a place where work is done on Erev Pesach before Chatzos. You're coming to a place where they do not do work. So you have to assume the chumrah of the place that you arrive to. So that fits with what the Mishnah says afterwards. Don't do work, and because then it will cause a machlekes. So you follow the minhag of the place. And don't do malacha. Ella, however, what else did it say in the Mishnah? You came from a place where they do not do work, and you came to a place where they do work. So what did the Mishnah say? That you have to keep your minhag from the place that you came from, to be stringent. But al yeshana adam mipnei machlekes. But then the Mishnah says that you shouldn't change because of a machlekes v'navid, and you should do work like the place that you arrived to. But ha'amrit naisnu nalav chumrei makim shehalach l'sham v'chumrei makim sheyatsa misham. But you're saying that you have to keep the chumreh of the place that you left there, and you should not assume the minhag that you came to. So you see over here that you have to keep your minhag, and you're not concerned about a machlekes. So what's the pshat in the Mishnah? So the Gemara says two pshatim. Amar Abaye areisha. This that it said in the Mishnah that you can't change because of a machlekes is only referring to the reisha, the first case, which is when you arrive to a place where they don't do work. Only regarding that it says that mipnei machlekes you shouldn't do different than them. But as far as a place where they do work, and you're not doing work over there you can't keep their minhag. You have to go according to your minhag, and over there on that the Mishnah did not say that you have to follow that minhag. That's a bias pshat. Rava says, Loila ma seifa. Really, it's going on the seifa as well. V'hachi ka'amar, and this is what the Mishnah is saying. Ein bezu mipnei shiniyah machlekes. When you come to a place, and the minhag there is that everybody is working, and you're going to keep your minhag not to work, this will not cause any machlekes. People will not think that you're doing different than their minhag. Why not? Ma'ika amris, what are you going to say? Haraya aimer. Anybody that's going to see that this guy is not going to work on this day, so they're going to say, Malacha Asura, this guy is doing different than us, and he has a minhag not to do work today. People won't say that. Meima Amri, you know what people are going to say? Kame batlani ave b'shuka. There's many people that just are, that don't work. There are many people that are batlani, that are out of a job, out of work, so they're not going to think that he's changing from their minhag. So therefore, when the Mishnah says, Al Yeshana b'pnei machlekes, it doesn't mean that you have to keep their minhag to not work. You have to keep their minhag, to work. If you're not going to work, people are going to think you're from those batlanim that don't go to work. That doesn't show that you're being mishana the machlekes. Huh? Yeah, nirpim, like we learned in last the chumash. Kapanim. So here in this Gemara, you see two pshatim in this inyan of not changing the minhag. This is the source. The Sfas Emes says, you see in our Gemara, when you don't change a minhag, there could be two reasons. Either it's because of machlekes. So if you're not doing like the minhag amakim privately, and it doesn't cause a machlekes, then it's not an issue. That's the first pshat of Rava or of Abaye. And the second pshat, according to Rava, when the Mishnah says Al Yishana b'pnei machlekes, that's not what it goes on. The Mishnah is just clarifying. In this case, it won't cause a machlekes. But b'chlal, the concept of not changing a minhag has nothing to do with machlekes. It's because if there's a minhag amakim, and you are there in this makim, and you're not going back, and you're here now for this yontif and for this time period, so then you have to follow the minhag makim. You become part of the makim, and you have to follow the minhag makim.